So now we're getting ready to have Colby talk about Pressbooks, Rebus, and Hypothesis.
So I'm Colby Morberg. I'm an assistant professor in agronomy, and I have two classes that I've used open textbooks in. The first one I ever made was the soils laboratory manual, and we're working on actually adapting it for Pressbooks just because I wanted the Pressbooks capability. But the first Pressbooks project I did was this soil and water conservation and annotated bibliography. And so what I'm going to do today is kind of give an overview of how I use Pressbooks and actually import a document just to show you how easy it is to actually modify book projects within Pressbooks. And then later on, I'm going to talk about a web annotation platform called Hypothesis, and also the Rebus community. So that's sort of the topics I'll cover today. All right, so the Soils Lab Manual. So this has already been published. It was published in 2017, and but we initially published it just as a Word document that we converted into a PDF to host it on the New Prairie Press website. But the PDF works. The problem is for my students, I'd say half of them use some device to access the lab manual digitally, and a good portion of those actually are using their cell phone. And cell phones don't really work too well for PDFs. So I actually wanted to convert it to Pressbooks so it could have a website that would actually function well and the students could use. So what you see up here is just the layout for all the chapters that are currently in the lab manual. And when this was actually first brought in, it was brought in as one giant Word document. And so Pressbooks, you import it, and it will sense what you have for all the level 1 headers, and it will turn the level 1 headers into chapter titles. And so it did that all automatically. But what I'm going to do is show you, actually, I guess before I import one, I'm going to just show you what the actual lab manual looks like. So I can click Visit Book. And each book has a landing page like you see here. And it has a short description, has author information, has the license info. And then you scroll down and it has the contents, and to keep going further, and it has all the metadata. And so we'll have more metadata to it later on, but for the most part, this one's pretty well ready to go. So that's the landing page, and then you just click read. I basically have a landing page that says this is a draft. We're working on some kinks to make it turn into a fully fledged web book in Pressbooks. But I can go to like any chapter, and I use a theme in Pressbooks that automatically formats all the chapters how I want them. And so there's a little bit of an intro, and then it has these text boxes that are pre-formatted. And so we have one for all the learning objectives for this particular lab, one for all the materials that anyone teaching with this would need to actually teach it. And then this semester I eliminated the textbook requirement for the lecture part of the class, because we used to actually refer in the lab manual to the commercial textbook like pages or chapters. But now I'm sort of using my annotated bibliography approach, and I just link out to other sources. And so those are listed there. And then now we have a pre-lab assignment. So we have a series of text boxes that are all kind of color coordinated. And then you get to the intro, and you have figures, and all the figures have captions, and there's also there's ways where we can add image data so that people that are using screen readers can actually see or listen to a description of what the figure actually shows. And just in the last week, I figured out that Pressbooks has a feature that you can enable to create tables within Pressbooks. And I noticed on this table, as I move the cursor over, it actually highlights that row. So it actually makes these like pretty great looking tables. So they're a lot better than the ones I made in Word prior. So I've been kind of impressed with that. But yeah, I think it makes for some great looking book chapters altogether. So now in terms of actually using it, so within the Pressbooks web book, you can just click the admin button and it takes you into the dashboard. And so from the dashboard, you can navigate to each of the chapters if you want to work on one individually. But I'm going to start with the process of just importing a Word document to actually create a new chapter. And so you go into import, so tools, import, and you would tell it what type of document you're going to bring in. I'm going to bring in a Word document. And the handout that you all have, so I have a Word document of that, and I'm going to make that into a book chapter here. So I'm just bringing in the Word document and upload file, set as a Word, and just click begin import. And from there, you can set it as a chapter or front matter, so the stuff that goes in the front of the book, or back matter. And so I'm gonna leave this as a chapter. And I already sensed what the title is based on the level 1 header. And so, oops, I need to select it first. All right, so yeah, much faster. And then from there, it goes into the organization tab. And so I can, if I want to, I can move it up. So I just moved it up a chapter or move it down. But if I want to actually view it, so I'll just click on the title there, and I'll go into the edit screen for that chapter. And it pretty much kept all the formatting that you guys see on the Word document. And if I want to, let's see, I want to move this out of the way. The links are active, yeah. And I added the links in in the Word document. So I did pretty much all the authoring actually in Word, and then I just import it, and it saves pretty much all the formatting. And then if I want to just preview what it looks like, so without making any changes from the original Word document, it's pretty much all like a well-formatted chapter. So it kept all the formatting that I wanted. And if I wanted to get a little more detailed into it, so I can go in and do all the HTML code for the whole chapter. I usually don't unless I have like something that is not working quite right. But most of the time, it works in the same platform that WordPress uses, or WordPress. So this is Pressbooks, and it basically uses the same platform that the blogging platform WordPress uses. And so it's pretty simple. And say if these objectives here, if I want to make those my objectives that's formatted like the rest of the book, I just highlight the text, and then all I did is go through the textbook option and figure out what textbook I wanted to specify. And so now it's formatted as my learning objectives. So I need to delete the header there, but all right. So it's pretty simple to modify. And yeah, if you can blog, you can write a book with Pressbooks. So it's pretty straightforward. And then in terms of adding tables, so I'm gonna, just because I just learned about it, I'm gonna just mention that too. So if I wanna add a table at the end, I can go to table press. Oops, I need to save this first. It will keep track of previous versions. So just like if you're using a Word document that's saved in OneDrive, you can go back and look at previous versions of the Word document. You can do the same thing in Pressbooks too. So if you screw something up, you can just go back to a previous version of it. But if I want to add a table, there's table press. And so this shows all the tables that I've created. Just click add new table. Give it a name and description. And we'll leave it at the default size. It creates a table, and it has all the sort of metadata for the table itself. And then I'll put some headings in there. And I can change things where like the first row becomes a header row, and I can add a footer if I need to, and there's some other just kind of basic settings in there.
So Colby, there's a question on Zoom. Can you upload Excel spreadsheet to make a table?
Possibly. I haven't actually tried that yet. I think most of mine I actually created it in the table. So I don't really have that many like very large tables. So I've just been kind of doing it by brute force here. But you can preview it, and then when you actually want to drop it into a chapter, you just copy that little code and say if I want to go back to the chapter that I was in. So at the very end, I just drop that code, and I can click preview. Maybe. And I added the table. So the table feature is pretty, I actually use that a lot for this lab manual. So it's,
She noted that there was an import table feature. Do you want to click that quickly, since you know table press a little bit more than probably most people do? Oh, import a table. There you go. Oh, so you got to leave the page though. So
that's okay.
Okay.
Not really worried about saving it too much. Yeah, it looks like you can import like CSV files. Okay. Excel. Yeah. All right. I learned something new during a demo. So that's
cool.
All right. So some of the other features that are on here. So the organize, you can. This is where you actually like reorder the chapters, and you can create new sections. So one thing to point out here. So right now the only section I have for the chapters is just main body. But if you wanted to have like different units, say unit 1, 2, 3, 4, you can actually create different sections and then make that a collapsible menu within the navigation for the webbook. So that's kind of a useful feature for organizing. And then for book info, this is where you actually add all the metadata for it. So you can add the title, you can have the subtitles, authors, and all the contributors that helped out. And if you're going through New Prairie Press, you'd add all the New Prairie Press info right here. Once you get an ISBN, they can add ISBN info to it. And this is helpful just because it makes it more discoverable, but also when someone actually goes to use some sort of browser plugin, they can use the plugin to actually capture all the metadata, so they can add that to Zotero or Mendeley or one of the other citation managers. And then you can also do things that actually make it. Not really fully understand how these are used, but you can add topics to the book so that people can figure out where to categorize it in a library, I think is kind of how it's used. So I've added a few that are relevant to the manual there. For appearance, this is where you actually choose your theme. And so there are several that are designed just for textbooks. There are others that are more for just people that are actually producing their own novel or some other type of book. So there's a bunch that are optimized for textbooks, and so the Andreessen one is the one I've been using. But you can choose a theme, and then within that theme, you can set different settings for the web version versus PDF. So let's see. So I can make all the sections collapse for the web navigation if I want to, just by checking that box. PDF, you can set what the margins are. So if you're trying to optimize it to actually be printed, then you might want to mess with the margins a little bit. For ebooks, you can do things just to make it easier to display on ebooks if you like. And there's also some like custom styles. So styles like headings or paragraphs or whatever, you can go in and actually create code. This is beyond my capabilities, but I know you can you can do it. I think we had a couple that I had New Prairie Press, so I had Ryan kind of modify to get that ready. But all right, so that's appearance. So there's a lot of options for customizing it exactly how you want. But if you want it easy, you can just use one of the already designed themes. And then for exporting, you can create settings or just check boxes in here for the types of things that you want it to be exported as. So you can set it up for PDF for print or for digital, EPUB, MOBI. So you get kind of the two primary ebook formats, and there's some other ones you can use as well. But you just click what you want to export, and then click export your book, and then you actually have a file in whatever format that you're using. It has a cover generator, but what I've done is just created my own covers and then upload that image file. I haven't actually used the cover generator. And let's see, let's go to plugins. So the table press is what I had to activate in here to actually get the table function. I haven't really used any of the other plugins that they have, but H5P, parse down.
So H5P is like assessment generator, sort of like questions and things. And so it's been plugged into a lot of these platforms and things as a way to, if you want to do that sort of activity.
For the media library, so you can upload all your pictures in here, and so once you have a file, you can go in and actually add. So we have alternative text. So this is a Uland sampler that we use for taking soil bulk density samples. So we have just kind of straightforward information about that image file, and then if you're getting it from other sources, you can actually give attribution to the original source for it. And you can also include things like licensing. So you can add all that metadata to the files. And then when you're actually working a chapter, if you just click the add media icon, and it'll bring up your media library, and you can just click what picture you want. So it's pretty straightforward in that regard. For users, so what I did to get my account set up is I spoke with the librarians and CADs and got set up with a Pressbooks account. And then once I was ready to go with that, I was set up as an administrator for the book, and I can add other users to it if I need to. So I have an undergrad that's working with me to actually get the lab manual I had formatted in Pressbooks. So she's been kind of helping me with that. Right now there's just 2 users, but you could have a team of authors all operate entirely within Pressbooks if you'd like to. Let's see, there is search and replace if you want to replace a certain term throughout the book. But the only other tool I use is just importing Word documents. And one I want to touch on though is hypothesis. So under settings, hypothesis. So hypothesis is a web annotation tool, and so I've allowed hypothesis in chapters, and then I've enabled it so any PDFs that I have in the media library, they can actually go into the PDF and annotate within that. And there's some other settings you can do to have it just open by default, or highlights on by default. But I'm going to show you one that I'm going to go to a different book. I'm going to show you what the web annotations look like. All right, so for the annotated bibliography book that I've been working on, I have it hypothesis enabled, and so it shows up on the right side. You can see this little tiny icon, and if I were to go to a chapter, where I go to one that I actually know has some comments on it. So I click that, and oops, actually went to a different chapter, I guess. All right, so in this chapter, we've had 3 comments. And so one of my colleagues had some peer review comments on it, more or less. And so I can actually go in, and these are set to public. And so you can see what the public comments are. And so anyone that has a Hypothesis account can actually go in and add annotations to it. And I can reply to those. And from an open peer review standpoint, any comment that I get for peer review, I can go in and respond to those or make the changes or whatever. And the whole process is open. So, and for me, I think that's kind of a useful way to do peer reviews for these books. But you can have these settings or these annotations be public. You can also set up groups. I thought about doing groups or a specific group for the peer review, but I decided just to make those public. But we could do one just for a demo, and you guys could join the group if you had a Hypothesis account, and you can go in and add your own comments to it. So if you're working on a course, so if you're actually using this for a course, you can set it up where so those of you at K-State can enable Hypothesis as a tool in Canvas. And you can actually set it up where you can grade students' annotations for websites or whatever you're trying to annotate. And so you just have to set it up in a group that they have to log into. And as long as they make their comments within that group, then it'll show up within the LMS somehow. I haven't experimented with that too much, but I know that it's possible. So that might be of interest to some of you. But I think from just creating open textbooks from that standpoint, I think Hypothesis is useful from a peer review standpoint. All right.
Colby, can I ask a question before you switch?
Yeah.
Do you foresee Hypothesis being enabled and teachers being to collect feedback from students kind of all the time? You know what I mean? On their resource, and then be able to use that kind of improve, you know what I mean, the resource with student feedback on, it's hard for me to understand, you know, this section, or could you provide more context around this topic or concept or that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I'm going to leave Hypothesis enabled for the book, and so for public comments, like anyone that has adopted the book for a class somewhere else, like their students could actually make comments on it. And so that's one way that I could get feedback, whether it be from students or faculty or just some random other reader. One thing I've also done for this textbook is at the very end, I set up a feedback page, and there's actually a form that I have linked to. So it's just like a web form. And so for that, like anyone can go in and just make a comment just through that without having a Hypothesis account. So I have kind of 2 ways that people can give me feedback all the time. And then I also sort of learning from the lab manual, which wasn't done in Pressbooks. It's kind of hard to track exactly how many people are actually using it for their own classes. And so one thing I did is I added a textbook adoption page. And the hope is that anyone that actually adopts this for use in their classrooms, they can actually fill this out. And this will help me kind of keep track of the actual impact of the book. So you get to see how many people have adopted for classes. And then later on, you might do a follow-up survey to figure out how many students are actually enrolled in their classes and what the total number of students actually is. So that's kind of a quick rundown on Pressbooks. You guys have any more specific?
I guess my other question was, do you do most of, and you might be able to talk about when you started and where you're at now, do you do most of your drafting and then import, or do you do most of your work like in Pressbooks, the platform itself? You know what I mean? If you're creating content and things, or are you making more of a Word document and then importing that in and then editing there?
So for this soil and water conservation book, the workflow for it, I worked with 25 other contributors, and 20 of them were actually students of mine. And so for all those contributors, what we actually did is set up like 2 things really. One is I use Slack to kind of coordinate all the communications. So if any of you used Slack before or know of it, so it's all right. So it's basically, instead of having a whole bunch of emails that are hard to keep track of, you can have all the communications in like one continuous line of text or one continuous kind of message platform. Yeah, and then you can have it organized
Microsoft
by
Teams that I think they just enabled. I think is something
stuff.
similar. Yeah.
Yep. So I use Slack to coordinate all the communication, which there actually wasn't that much, which kind of surprised me. People just kind of plugged away and did the thing, and I can kind of see who was doing what based on the edits. But the actual authoring of it was mostly done in Google Drive. So we had Google Docs set up for every chapter, and I could keep track of what users were actually like adding what content to it. For the student contributions, they actually submitted their own annotated bibliographies that are on specific topics as a Word document over Canvas, like through class. And then from those, I would edit that and then incorporate it into the Google Doc. And then once the full chapter was finished, then I exported it as a Word document. I did some of my editing to make it all kind of have a uniform voice. And then I would send the final version of the Word document of the chapter to a technical editor who fixed all my grammar errors and stuff and got it ready for actual publication. And then once those chapters were finished, I'd bring it into Pressbooks and just do kind of like final formatting for it. Now, one more note I wanted to mention on Pressbooks from an accessibility standpoint is so for this annotated bibliography, one of the issues is like most of the chapters or most of the content is a citation where I needed an actual URL. But the problem with that is if students are using a screen reader, then the screen reader is going to read out every single character in a long URL. And so what we did is, so for this URL right here, for example, what I do is I go into the text side and on all the code for that hyperlink, I would add what we call an ARIA label. So this text right here, this is ARIA -label equals quote, and then I have actual text. And what that does is it tells screen readers to read this text instead of reading all this text. So it actually kind of forces the hand for the screen reader. And that made it a lot more accessible for students, but the issue is it just took so long to actually go through and manually code every one of those links. So we ended up having like 700 links for it. So it took a lot of effort. All right. Any other questions on Pressbooks? So I have one more thing I was going to talk about. How are we doing on time?
You have about 14 minutes. So
14, okay.
Pretty good.
All right.
One thing I'll note while he's changing directions is Shaylin did say that there is a Hypothes app available in Canvas through settings apps. And so Colby talked about being able to use that in Canvas. And so I wanted to mention that to the group.
I haven't explored it too much, but yeah, I know it's there and I plan to try to work with it in the future. So one other resource I wanted to talk about today was Rebus. So Rebus, I learned of Rebus through the Open Education Conference. And it's basically this online community where the idea is if you get a lot of people that can all contribute to one project, it makes it not such a big effort to actually produce one open textbook. And so Rebus is really set up more or less kind of like an online forum. So if you scroll down on the main Rebus page, it has all these like active threads where people are talking about different projects or different questions or what have you. But there's a couple things I want to point out. So one is for the resources, they have two open textbooks. One is called A Guide to Making Open Textbooks with Students. And the other one is called Rebus Guide to Publishing Open Textbooks So Far. And these two books, like I use these a ton, especially the one for the Guide to Making Open Textbooks with Students. So they're both set up as Pressbooks. The Zoom stuff is right in the way of the browser here.
You can drag that piece out.
Ah, learned something else new today. So it's set up just like my other Pressbook ones are. So they have a landing page, and then they have like example memorandums of understanding that you can sign with students, where their work that they submit as an assignment could be used as part of the textbook. And so I actually used their model MOU for doing that with mine. And they have lots of other great chapters and great case studies about how to actually develop open textbooks with students. So I highly recommend that book if you want to go that route. Now going back to Rebus, one thing they do is if you actually start a project and you kind of submit it through their platform, they will create kind of like a homepage for your project, and so it kind of coordinates links to all the threads that are in the discussions. It also advertises things like calls for contributors. So if you want to actually recruit more contributors, they can kind of help facilitate that. And so, trying to find the one. You can see they have a lot of projects that are going right now. All right, so here's the one for the soil and water conservation textbook. All right, so this is a summary of all the threads that were focused on it, and then they have a homepage that they can set up for each ongoing textbook that's part of the community. And on the homepage, it'll show like who's coordinating the project, what the license is, some of the other kind of basic data of it, what the project stage is, and you can have a description, an outline, some other resources, and it can also kind of list out who's actually on the team. And so it's kind of a good way to just get the message out about what the actual project is. And along the way, if you're actually trying to recruit other people to help out, then this little participate tab, it'll actually advertise what they're looking for. So are they looking for contributing authors? Are they looking for people that just need help with editing? In my case, the book's pretty much done. I'm just looking for peer review comments. So all I have right now is peer reviewers. But yeah, it's a great platform. And that ARIA label thing that I mentioned earlier for the accessibility, I actually got the answer for that from a question I posted to the discussion boards. So, so there's lots of good resources that Rebus puts out there. All right.
Is there a cost? I guess
there is not. So Rebus is free, and yeah, I've had a great experience with it. So I think they work pretty closely with the Pressbooks, and I think it is possible to. If there are people that don't have a resource like New Prairie Press on their campus, I think it's possible to actually create a Pressbooks textbook from Rebus and actually have Rebus be the publisher for it. So they kind of help facilitate the textbook process from a few different angles.
Do you know how their business model works then? I know they're nonprofit, but how
you know that?
They underwriting. Maybe
That's a good question. We're not really sure. Oh, yeah, Hewlett, I think, is funding it. There we go. And Hewlett's also who funds the Open Education Working Group. Yep. Yeah, they're out of Montreal, I think. Yep.
I have questions on chat. I may have an answer or okay, great. Okay.
How do I make the chat show up here? Is there a chat button that I'm just not seeing, or what? At the bottom of this screen? I think what you guys are seeing is different than what I'm seeing. Huh, that's strange. So anyone that can see the chat, can you call out questions for me?
No, the questions are there, still the hypothesis statement. It's just, since it hasn't been clicked on that computer that's displaying, it's still showing up as new.
Okay. All right, any more questions? All right.
If not, please join me in thanking Colby. I think it was very interesting to hear about.
Thank you.